I'll just keep adding them as we go. Cool. There's a couple more in the waiting room, so I'll keep going. Let's kick off. Chantal Burns is our special guest tonight. A bit of history with me and Chantal. I think Chantal, the first time I sort of came across, let me see if I can get it, is Instant Motivation, your book.
It's big.
Oh, there we
It's
go.
like the invisible book.
Anyway, so 2015, I think, is the first time I actually read it. Because at that stage, I was obsessed with trying to find out more about the principles. And I consumed whatever I could put my hands on, whatever I could watch, whatever I could listen to. And instant motivation was really good because it simplified a lot of aspects for me. And coming from a corporate commercial background into this, I felt there wasn't really any book that talked about things like motivation as a leader that I can use as a way to give people a better experience within the working environment, and also for myself to deal with all the pressures, the stress, and things that comes with leading large organizations, leading transformation programs, and so forth.
Yeah.
Instant motivation led me to reach out to Chantal, who I think Chantal in 2016, if I remember right, you were running the Conscious Leadership School. And the Conscious Leadership School was a way for me at a corporate level to go, hey, business, I need some funding. There's a really good leadership course there that I want to attend. And at that stage, I've done my bachelor's, I've done my master's, I've done certifications in project and program management. And I was really looking at a leadership course. And what better leadership course than one being embedded in the three principles? I've then joined the Conscious Leadership School. And I think, Chantal, it was over 6 or 9 months. I cannot remember exactly.
Yeah.
But blown away with the faculty. We've had Keith Blevins in there, we've had Sandra Crott, we've had a whole host of people. But the best part of it is I've managed to attend the last cohort in person with Chantal and Sandra Crott. And following that, hanged around in London, and more specifically, Chantal, I think, was based in Albany and probably still is. But managed to spend a week there with them on and off discussing things and going on long walks. And it really helped me deepen my understanding of the principles, which for me was a memory that I always treasure. And Chantal recently launched a book called Bulletproof, which is probably another invincible. Oh, it's not invincible this time. This is a book. And I thought it's a great time to bring Chantal in, not just to find out where she is at this stage, but what led her to write the book, but also for her to share a bit about her journey into the principles, because I think for a lot of us coming into the principles, that's always valuable to hear other people's perspective. And in her book, chapter 5 talks about stress, worry, and to a large extent anxiety as well. And I thought if Chantal could maybe share her journey to date, also what led her to write the book, and then go a bit more into her view and her perspective on stress, worry, and anxiety. So Chantal, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you. Lovely to be here with you.
It's
Yeah.
probably the
Yeah.
longest intro you've ever had.
I don't know what that means though. What does that mean?
No, just
But that was that the Conscious Leadership School program that you attended was the inaugural one. It was the first, that was the first iteration of that version. And it was amazing when you came over from Australia and joined us. Like, it was such a special thing to have you in the room. And then we also had Sarah, who come over from Dubai. And for you, just for everyone else, hi everyone, nice to meet you. We I really hope my internet is okay. Uh, Fingers crossed. But we were used to seeing Rowan on a laptop. So what we would do is we would put a laptop on a chair, and that was Rowan's chair. And so his face was on the laptop on the chair, and he always had these big sort of headphones on. And we all thought he looked a bit like a pilot, like he was sitting in the cabin. So he became known as the pilot. It was quite funny. It was like a little in joke amongst the group. But then when he finally came into the room in real life, it was like, wow, he's a whole real person. There's like not just a head, there's a neck and a body and everything. It was very special. very special. Yeah, it was lovely. Hard to believe that was like nearly like 10 years ago. Crazy. Crazy where
Yeah,
the time goes.
very good. So everyone,
Yeah,
welcome.
so
I'm going to hand over to Chantal and ask Chantal to maybe tell us a bit more about her journey into the principles, and then move straight on to her view on freedom from stress, worry, and anxiety, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Chantal.
yeah, thank you. Well, just yeah, okay. So a bit about my sort of journey to the principles. I think it's when I speak to other people, there's a lot of similarities, you know, with other people's stories in one way or another. But I'd always been really interested in personal development. I've been in business and organizations for many years. And from a really young age, I was just very interested in understanding more about how the mind works. I just recognized that attitude was really critical, and that lots of people had all kinds of different ideas about the mind and different ways of using it. That was just apparent to me from young. And then I think as I got older, just got a deeper appreciation for the role of psychology in our experience, and it became important for my job. You know, sort of early on in my career, I was in very kind of commercial roles where we had to be very determined, and we had to be okay with rejection. We had to take a lot of no's. And I really noticed that some people really thrived in those environments and other people didn't. They found it very difficult. So that really piqued my interest even more. Then I started studying the field of psychology, and I've really been, I guess, studying it ever since, except that it sort of moved into, I suppose, more of a spiritual domain when I started to learn more about the principles. But there were some building blocks before the principles. You know, I was an NLP teacher for many years at quite a high level. So we were already looking, you know, in terms of neurolinguistic programming, we were already starting to look at the deeper structure of experience and to go deeper into language and the role of that in how we show up every day in our lives. And then I did something called Landmark Education, the Landmark Forum, which some of you may have heard of. I mean, it's global, and I know there are centres all over the world. That was in 1999, 2000, and that really sort of opened my eyes to how we're constantly making meaning, you know, that we're meaning makers. One way that Landmark Education talks about it is that we're meaning makers. We move through life constantly assigning and making meaning of everything. And that was very, at the time, profound to me, because although I had an appreciation for the role of the mind, and although I recognized that how we think has a bearing, you know, on our success, on our failures, on our experience of relationships, everything, I hadn't seen how complete that is in terms of how all-consuming, how that generalizes into everything, that we're making meaning about everything. So it was sort of that kind of opened the aperture a bit more, like, oh, okay, there's even more to this than I realized. And then in early 2000s, about 2008, I a friend of mine who's also a coach, Jamie Smart, who you may have heard of, we've known each other for a long time, and he was starting to look at this thing that he was describing as the principles. And I remember him saying to me, hey, you've got to come along to this seminar. And I said, he said, just, you've got to come. And I said, well, who is it with? And he said, this man called Sydney Banks, and he's going to be in London. And he said, you don't need to ask any more questions. You just need to come. So, and I thought, okay, he's really keen. Sounds like it's worth going along to. And that was going to be September 2009. And very sadly, Mr. Banks passed away that year, 2009. And obviously, so that session never happened. But we were sort of this close to being in a room with him and listening to him, which, you know, I look back on now and think, wow, that would have been incredible. And that was the beginning of an exploration and a deeper dive into, I guess, the deeper structure behind our reality. And yeah, I haven't really looked back since. So I as I started to learn more about it, other ways of working and other ways of being just kind of fell away a bit, really, I suppose is a simple way of describing it. I used to do a lot of belief change work, you know, that was part of my NLP kind of toolkit, if you like. And I remember one day sitting with a client and they were struggling with something. And my previous inclination would have been to really sort of dive into, you know, individual beliefs that they had and help them change those beliefs into sort of more empowering ones or more positive ones. And I just noticed, it was really after the fact that I noticed, as I was reflecting back on the session, as I often do, that I hadn't gone that way, and that I'd started to explore with them the nature of thought and the nature of mind. And that felt very different. And what was really interesting was that I hadn't consciously decided that was what was going to happen. I just noticed, there was a kind of conversation that I was no longer having, and it had kind of been superseded or replaced somehow very naturally in the moment with this other conversation where I guess I was figuring stuff out, and I was figuring it out with my clients, which is kind of what you do, right? You're learning all the time. So, and I guess the only other thing to say is that I always wanted to improve and learn and be better at my work and be a better girlfriend or a better friend, or but there was kind of a way where it was coming from a not good enough place or a broken place or something. And learning about the principles really helped me to see the wholeness in all of us, you know, and the unbreakable nature of spirit. And that has really made a big difference. I mean, and that is such a healing, there's such a healing revelation when we sort of see that we can never be broken. I mean, our bones can break. That's why my new book's called Bulletproof, because it's not speaking to our physical self, but to our inner spiritual self, our inner spiritual psychological self. So yeah, that's a little bit of the journey.
Thanks. Thank you for sharing, Chantal. One of the things that stood out reading Bulletproof is dispelling a lot of the myths around resilience, which I thought is a really good way of, because we live with these myths, we live with these beliefs of what resilience is and what it isn't. Can you maybe talk a bit more about some of those myths and some of the beliefs we have growing up?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the motivation for writing the book, really, was because I'd read loads and loads of stuff about personal development and about resilience in one way or another, even though they weren't always titled with the word resilience. They were about having, you know, inner strength and overcoming difficulty and those kinds of things. And as I started to learn about the principles, I realized, gosh, there's such a lot that is said about resilience that isn't really true. But it sounds interesting and it sounds true and it seems like it has legs. But then when you start to really look at it, you realize maybe there are some flaws in this. And so one of those, there are many, and obviously I've written about those in this book, but one of them is that we have to control or manage our emotions. And this was something actually that I really subscribed to for years and years and years. You know, got to, you know, mind management and reframing, got to really manage our thinking and manage, you know, there's all this stuff going on out in the world. There's all this stuff going on in here in this world. ostensibly it's built on the premise that there are really two worlds. There's this outer material world, if you like, and then there's this inner psychological, spiritual world. And we're kind of at the behest of this external world, and we talk about it as external. You know, we use words like outside or external, and it can seem as if that is a world that is separate to us. And because of that is sort of almost like, I describe it in the book as the mother of all myths, the idea that there are two worlds. And this let's call it the sort of the bedrock myth, that then creates a lot of baby myths. It spawns a lot of other myths, and one of those is that we have to control or manage our emotions, because of course if there is this world out there that we are in some way responding to, and that we are in some situations a victim of, there are all these different situations that can make us feel a way we do or don't want to feel, then okay, what choices do we have? We either try and manage that world, manage other people, manage situations, manage the circumstances, try and change them, or so that's us kind of trying to mess around with the externals, if you like. And it's not that there aren't some big issues in the world that need to be fixed or resolved, because there are, and I'm involved in projects that are very much about trying to resolve things in our, let's call it our sort of material or environment. But the other option is that we start trying to control our own minds and try and change how we respond to things. And one of those areas is to try and manage our emotions. And I've written quite a lot about this, actually. I think it's chapter 4 or 5, which is why positive thinking is outdated, which is really just to start to look at what are the downsides of positive thinking and focusing on thinking positive or having only positive feelings. There is a problem with that, because if we think it's not okay to feel anything other than positive and happy and all of those things, then we start to then diminish or deny some of the more difficult feelings. And it's really important to be able to feel all those feelings, including the difficult ones. And so one of the myths that I talk about is the idea that we have to control and manage or hide our emotions. And actually, the more that we start to understand the role of emotion and what it is and what it's made of, that it's made of energy, that our emotions, our feelings are serving a really, really important role in our lives. You know, all flavors, that they are, you know, they're messengers, that they are providing information, that they are alerting us to something, that they are waking us up. These physical responses to a psychological life are gifts, and they need to be honored. And I never knew that. I was very much the can-do positive thinking girl, and I still am to some degree. I still absolutely subscribe to looking for the positives in a situation, but so I'm not denying I think that's important, you know, me personally. At the same time, that kind of forced positivity, that kind of fake it till you make it, that kind of whenever someone says, how are you always say, I'm great. Like, it's okay to go, do you know what, I feel a bit shit today, and it's fine, like, and we can just be honest, and we don't have to constantly put on this game face. I think that's really important, really helpful. And the more that we understand about our emotional life, and the more that we understand the origins of those feelings and the purpose and the role of them, then the less scared we are of them. And then the less likely we are to try and push them away. Because why push something that serves a purpose? Why push something away that's made of energy and can't harm us? So that's one of the myths that I really try and explore quite deeply in the book. And then another one of the myths that I think is really a powerful one for us to see is this idea that adversity equals distress, that, you know, that difficult times automatically means that we're going to feel horrible or that we're going to suffer terribly. And that idea shows up in lots of different places. And one of the places it shows up is in grief and loss, which I've written about quite a bit in the book too. There's a chapter on grief and loss. And, you know, the idea that when there is loss, that automatically means there'll be suffering, and that if there isn't suffering, then there must be something wrong with us. If we don't feel distressed in certain kinds of situations, there must be something wrong with us. So the idea that there's this kind of linear path when difficult things happen, and we know that it's not true. We see it all the time, you know, in ourselves and with the people that we love and our clients, perhaps the people around us, that, you know, what stresses one person out, or what one person finds incredibly difficult or uncomfortable, another person has a very different experience of that kind of situation. So we see all these anomalies everywhere, and this is not to say that there's anything wrong with distress, and sometimes distress might be a very appropriate response. And also we have a built-in fear response. It's there for a reason, for survival and to keep us safe. It's ultimately a survival mechanism, a protective mechanism. So also comes back to the importance of honoring all feelings, honoring all responses. And we can honor them when we understand them. We can honor them when we have more insight into what they mean and the purpose that they serve. So that's just touching on those a little bit.
Another thing that stood out from the book is the various distinctions, which I felt was really important to have a distinction between various things. In fact, I think in chapter 5, you had freedom from stress, anxiety, and burnout. One of the distinctions there, if you don't mind talking a bit more about it, because I felt it was really important to give an audience. Its reference is the causation versus correlation as a useful distinction. Do you mind talking a little bit more about that? Because I felt it was a really important one when it comes to stress, worry, things like burnout and so forth.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it is an important one. I've certainly learned and keep learning a lot about this. I use the example how many people have seen the book, by the way? How many people have it's copying me. How many people have anyone read the book or seen the book yet? Not you have, thanks.
May have downloaded the chapters, but that's probably not a full book.
Okay.
I actually waited like 4 weeks for the book, Chantal. I had to get it from the UK. It's not available in Australia yet.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'll have to ask my publisher about that. Yeah, I'll let them know. I use the example for this, correlation versus causation of, imagine you're sitting in a roller coaster. You're strapped, you get strapped into the seat in a roller coaster. The ride's just about to begin. You notice that, your heart is beating faster, or maybe your hands are getting clammy and sweaty, and maybe you feel, some other sensations in your body. And it seems like those are being caused by the fact that you're strapped into this seat, and it's because you're in a roller coaster. It's like, if it wasn't for the roller coaster, I wouldn't be feeling these feelings. So that's an example of cause effect. I'm in the roller coaster, I'm feeling these feelings, and those two things get automatically connected. But just because we're experiencing certain sensations, and we're also in a particular situation, doesn't mean that one is causing the other. It's just that we're having those sensations and we're in that situation. And for me, roller coaster is an interesting example, because just like being on a plane and experiencing turbulence, which I wrote about in the first book, like I remember sitting on the plane, and I was on my way to Tokyo. I was doing quite a lot of work in Japan at the time, and the turbulence was really, really bad. And I've never really unlike my partner who thinks flying is great and loves flying, I don't, and it's just a means to an end. If I need to get somewhere and that's the only way, then I'll fly. And if I want to be in that place. Anyway, this particular day, the plane was bouncing. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. Look, it was bouncing. And I was just inside. I was freaking out, absolutely freaking out. And I looked, but I remember I was reading at the time, and I was doing a bit of prep for when I arrived in Japan. And I looked around the plane, and I suddenly noticed that I was sort of I looked around expecting to see other people making eye contact with me and going, oh, so I could feel like I was in good company. But I looked around the plane, and no one met my eyes with the same level of fear and panic. I looked around, and there were kids messing around. There were couples kissing. There were people sitting and eating. There were all these different experiences going on. And I remember thinking, hang on a minute, hang on a second. This is a thought thing, isn't it? I'm not having a conversation with myself. I suddenly realized, oh my goodness me. Turbulence doesn't make me feel anything. The plane is moving and bouncing, but there's hundreds of different experiences going on in this plane right now. And it was like one of those light bulb moments. Oh, seeing it so in Technicolor like that, seeing it in 3D, experiencing it that way is so powerful. And it doesn't mean that I don't like turbulence. I don't fly as much anymore, but that's another story. It doesn't mean that I don't like turbulence, but because I have a deeper appreciation for the mechanics of what's going on, on the plane, I understand a bit more about how planes work and about turbulence and what that means, but also have a bit more understanding about the mechanics of my own mind and what's going on. It allows me to sit in those feelings, however horrible they might feel, but I can sit in them without ramping them up even more. So causation, correlation. So before, it absolutely looked like being on a plane, as soon as it starts bouncing, I feel terrible. So if I don't want those feelings, don't fly, basically. That was my option. I don't want to experience that, don't get on a plane. Now I know that I can be on a plane and experience the turbulence. Don't like it. My mind starts to go to all kinds of places, but then I can ground myself in the moment and sort of calm myself down by remembering how the system works. So with stress, anxiety, I was experiencing all those things: stress, anxiety, overwhelm. You name it. I don't think there was any kind of feeling or experience that I wasn't having that day, on that flight, because it's a very long flight, by the way, and the turbulence was not just 5 minutes. It went on and on and on. I was like, when is this gonna stop? So I had to, see something powerful for myself so I could get through it.
Very good. So Tom, with stress, worry, and anxiety, what would you say is leading people to burnout? Because in a way, the reason why I'm asking it, a lot of people in a work environment burns out. But if you think about the work they're doing, it's not physical labor. They sit in front of a PC, they interview people, they consult people, they sit in meetings all day, and then they start burning out. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Burnout is a bit of an epidemic now. It's happening for a lot of people. And what's interesting is that, hang on one second. It's not just happening for people who are, like you said, in very sort of physical or particularly physically demanding jobs. Actually, it's happening for people across the board in all sectors, whether it's in construction. Actually, it's quite a lot of people in construction who are now experiencing more burnout, but also it's quite an epidemic amongst doctors, amongst nurses, doctors, healthcare professionals. And also it's pretty rife in social care as well, which I do a lot of work in social services. And so the question is Jenny trying to say something? Okay, I'm seeing lots of 00000. Oh, Jenny, I can't hear you, but is it just is it a phantom typist on your chat? It's I love that. Your cat is speaking to us. That's just made my day, absolutely made my day. Listen, I'm going to be telling that story for a very long time. We love you, Mia. Mia, you can join us anytime. Mia can come to all the sessions. That was brilliant. That was my cat. I'm literally going to be laughing about that later. Thank you, Jenny. That was a gift. What were we talking about? Burnout. Yeah. So, okay. This is actually, there's quite a personal thing here for me at the moment, because I noticed recently that I think I got quite close to burnout within the last month. And I don't think I've ever experienced that before in the way that I've experienced it. And because I write about it, because I've been learning about it, because I'm helping others all the time, and a lot of my clients, a lot of the people I work with, whether they're leaders, whether they're in the healthcare profession, social workers, politicians, whoever they are, none of us are immune to the devices of our own minds. What I started to notice was that we don't always notice what we need to notice in good enough time. So, Rowan, when you ask the question, what takes us to burnout? The other question is, what kind of brings us back from the brink? A very powerful part of that for me is recognizing and noticing our own state, our own physical and mental state. And for a lot of people, we don't really start to listen to our body. To listen to your body, to listen to the signals is so important. Comes back to the role of feelings, the role of emotions, the role of sensations. Our system is beautifully designed. We're born into a psycho-spiritual, physical system that works beautifully and that gives us real-time feedback on what is going on the activity of the mind. And so I realized just recently, I hadn't been listening to my system. I hadn't really been listening. I mean, I noticed that, for example, I was tired. I noticed that I've been carrying quite a lot. I've been carrying quite a lot of other people's stuff. So I had been dealing with some health, and my inclination was to put myself last and still try and take care of and help other people. Does that make sense? So I was, and can you hear me okay? Let me know if my sound goes. I'm getting little signals saying that the internet is unstable, so let me know. So I can look back now and realize that there were some moments where I needed to stop and I didn't. There were some moments I needed to listen to what my system was telling me, and I didn't. And so I noticed I was getting very emotional, as in, when I say very emotional, I'm quite an emotional person, as in my where my feelings, most people know how I'm doing, I don't really, there's no game face particularly with me, but I noticed I would just start crying, just randomly start crying, just lots of tears, and I thought, gosh, there's a lot of energy here that needs to that's trying to get released somehow. What is going on? And I realized, yeah, I need to take care of myself. Now, what happens is, and I write about this in many different ways in the book. Lots of things stop us listening to ourselves. We're so busy taking care of other people. We're so busy thinking that we're responsible for everything and everyone else. Some of that is ego-based. You know, our identity is attached, and our identity is wedded to being the savior, to helping, to, you know, we get something from that. But the problem is that when that is at the detriment of listening to your system and listening to what's going on within you, that's when it gets problematic. So I have, because I think it's important to share from our own experience, right? I have noticed recently that I'm very quick to lean in and help. Not so good at asking for help. I actually put a post on Facebook about this recently. I'm really good at offering, not so good at asking. When people ask how I am, it's not that I want to feign positivity. It's that I don't want to put, in my mind, put anything on anyone else because they've got enough going on already. And I'm sure you can relate to this. We're all doing this kind of stuff to some degree. We're holding back because we think we know what other people think and feel. We don't. We hold back because we don't want to worry anyone else. But then that means that we think that we are somehow in control of how other people feel. We're not. So again, the principles are all over all of this. And I've been getting a new lesson recently about listening, really listening to the nudges, listening to the, not to anything cognitive, but listening to the sensations in my system that have been saying to me for a while, slow down, take a rest, have a rest. Everything will just carry on fine. You can step back for a bit. It's okay. Or I've got to launch my book. I've got to be out doing this, that, and the other. And then that voice saying, well, do you? You know? So I think that burnout is, I don't want to say that burnout has nothing to do with circumstances, because if I think about social workers and I think about the social care system here in the UK, some of it is really broken. Some of it needs massive reform. And a huge amount is put on social workers. A huge number of cases are expected to be handled. A huge number of referrals are expected to be managed. And a lot of the social workers that I've worked with are tired and they feel the weight of responsibility, which is why understanding about the responsibility trap is so important. They feel the weight of responsibility for taking care of everything, because a lot of people that are social workers are doing it as a vocation. They're not doing it for money. They're doing it because they want to help people. They want to safeguard children. And so there is definitely a circumstantial element to burnout. However, when we can take care of our own minds and bodies, when we understand where our own fears and concerns are coming from, when we understand more about the role and the nature of thought and consciousness and how that is playing out moment to moment, we can take a huge amount off our minds, that sort of subtractive nature of resilience, which is to see through the thought traps, to see through some of the untruths that we're holding on to see where we've kind of created a cause effect that doesn't really exist. As we start to see through some of that, then our minds start to quieten down through the reduction of some of that distortion, the mental distortion. So for me, what's powerful is, you know, what's the interference that I've got going on right now? And what is it I need to see for that interference to reduce, so that then I can relook at this situation. I can meet this situation with more perspective and clarity. So yeah, that's a little bit for me about what comes up when you ask about burnout.
It's great to hear that. I Spot on. Thank you very much, Chantal. I'm conscious of time. I would like to open up for anyone with questions. If you want to ask a question, either around a book or anything in general that Chantal talked to tonight, feel free. If not, I'm happy to keep going. I've got some more questions, but
yeah, well, let's give it a moment and see if anyone wants to share anything, or if you heard anything there that was helpful, or if you have questions or anything you want to share from your own experience that has surfaced.
I was wondering, what's a good method to ground yourself in the moment when you're having difficulty?
Yeah, well, sometimes sometimes you just have to ride that wave. I think sometimes we just have to get better at riding the wave in the moment. But for me, and I don't think there's sort of one answer for everybody here, but for me, it's what I just mentioned before. If I notice that I'm really sped up, or if I notice that I'm feeling out of sorts, and if I know I want more perspective, or I want a bit more peace, then I know that the first place I need to look is what's going on within me. What meaning am I making right now about the situation or the experience that I'm in right now? I know it has to be an inner inquiry. That's the thing I can pretty much get access to that. The other thing that strikes me is, and we're not going to always see this in the moment, is remembering that there isn't anything to fix. I mean, not with on the inside anyway. Because a lot of the time, what's going on is that we are judging our feelings or judging our emotions and wishing that we could feel a different way. And what that does is create more energy and more noise in the system. So there is something about just being with what is. And actually, it's that metaphor of I've got a pond, we've got a small pond, and sometimes it gets quite a lot of gunk. We've got fish and stuff, and I've learned not to dive in with a big stick, stirring it all up too much. You need to be a little bit more gentle with it, because it does really stir it up. But it's always amazing to me. I mean, it's a nice metaphor, because for me it's so true that when you leave it alone, everything settles and the silt and everything moves to the bottom of the pond, and then the water is clear again. So I think for me, part of it is just not trying to do too much with it at all. In a way, not trying to ground myself. It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? But sometimes our desire to feel better can end up churning up more for us. But knowing that actually it's okay for me to just feel how I feel right now, be gentle with myself, feelings ebb and flow. And there is a kind of a self-correcting nature to our psychological system. So reminding myself of that, and you reminding yourself of that, will be helpful for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. I've got a couple of things just that I really wanted to make sure that I shared with you today. So while other questions or reflections might be coming up, but I really wanted to share this because I think this is part of the myths that can really be unhelpful. And I wrote this down because I underlined it because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget to share this. Feeling stressed doesn't mean you're not resilient. So whatever feelings we're having, it doesn't, because resilience is a deeper spiritual quality. You know, resilience is the nature of nature. Resilience is nature, and we are nature. So just because someone's feeling scared, might be feeling scared, or might be feeling stressed, or might be feeling anxious, often, actually, there was a lady on another conversation that I had recently, and she shared this towards the end of the talk, and she said that she'd been taking care of this some older people, and that there was an older lady that she'd been helping, who had said to her that she felt that now that she was older, she didn't feel that she was as resilient, she could be resilient anymore because she was older. But again, you know, age has nothing to do with resilience. And this person that shared this said, now I can go back and I can share that with her. I can help her to see that her age has nothing to do with her capacity for resilience, because resilience isn't a personal human quality. Resilience is a pre-existing quality that we're born into. So even when we're feeling stressed, or if we're feeling anxious, or whatever of the more difficult feelings might be coming up for us, it doesn't say anything about how resilient we are. It has nothing to do with our capability, unless we think it does, unless that's the meaning we're making, which is, oh, I feel a bit anxious, that means I've lost my resilience. That's not true. That's another one of those cause effects that isn't real. So I know that I can have anxious feelings sometimes, but I know that I still have all of the resilience that, you know, that we're born with, because it's spiritual, not human. It's not a personal accomplishment to be resilient. It's a gift that we have really nothing to do with. And we see this all the time, because, you know, we've all had experiences where we've been up against it and we've found that little extra bit of strength that we just didn't think we had. You know, you're running a marathon, or you're running a 5K or whatever, and you think you've got nothing left in the tank, and then suddenly just a little bit more, you get that little bit more in the tank. You think, where did that come from? I've had that experience where I thought, I'm dying, there's no way I'm going to make it to the finish line, and then suddenly, you know, you get this burst, like, where did that come from? You know, we've all had those moments where, you know, you found that extra bit of grit or determination, you know, where you've overcome really, really difficult times. Yeah, I mean, there are so many stories of resilience that show that it's really not a personal quality so much as a deeper essence of who we are.
Chantal, could I ask you something? It's Sue Hannah here. Do you ever bring up
Hi,
the word,
Sue.
hello? Do you ever bring up
Hello.
the word ego when you're sort of thinking about these more negative thoughts, or like, I don't hear that mentioned very often, but to me, when I'm in my negative mindset, it's more my ego and my outer focus, as opposed to that spiritual self that is well, the ego's separated. So does that make sense to you? Do you ever bring up the word ego very much in your work?
Yes, sometimes. I suppose, I mean, ego has tends to be used in sort of Freudian and other psychological theories. So I think sometimes it can be either sort of misunderstood or used in so many different ways. I suppose the other thing is that I don't tend to align the idea of ego as being negative, because a person can feel, our ego can make us feel, we could be very positive and kind of almost grandiose, and that can be, that's ego too. The way I tend to think about ego And I like the way Sid Banks describes it in The Missing Link and some of his other books, which is that it's everything we think about ourselves and everything we think about the world, i.e., all personal thought constructs really are ego. They are the hard drive, as opposed to the full unadulterated, unbound system that we're born into. So, but it makes sense to me what you're saying. I just don't tend to align it with a sort of a positive negative bent. I just recognize that we have all these different ideas about the world, and they are ideas. That's what they are. They're thought, they're manifestations of mind. And that for me has been helpful, rather than thinking about sort of positive versus negative, or am I in my ego, or am I not? Because I think to some degree we're always going to be navigating the world through our own sort of personal or subjective lens, and in a way that subjective lens is ego. But I don't want to make it the bad guy kind of thing. I just want to recognize when I'm in construct and be able to pull back and go, okay, so that's an idea, that's a rule that I made up, that's an expectation, that's thought, that's up for grabs, that's not fact. That's not fact. That's actually another way that I ground myself, coming back to Patricia's question too, which is, well, what are the facts here? What are the actual facts here? What's real here? I know what feels real, but what's actually real? So yeah, I do use the term sometimes, but I just think of it in a, I suppose, like quite a broad sense of everything that we think about ourselves and the world, which we could class as being positive or negative.
Thank you.
Any final questions?
Yeah, I'd love to, or even if it's not a question, you just want to share something, don't be shy. Brad, I like your pictures in the background. They're nice. I keep looking at them, trying to work out awareness.
From my perspective, the myth of me was a really interesting chapter. Can you maybe talk more for the people here about the myth of me?
Yeah. Well, that links very much to this sort of ego conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah,
all of the ideas we have about all the ideas we have about who we are. I really wanted to hone in on personality in this book, because I talk about identity, in various ways in my first book, in Instant Motivation, but I really wanted to start to look at this idea of personality, because we talk about personality like it is fixed. In fact, a lot of people say, that's just my personality, that's just how I am, I can't change, that's my personality. And then if you think about the word personality, it's got the word person in it, personal. It's got personal. I just realized that. It's not just the word person, it's got personal in it. Oh my goodness me, I'd never realized that before. How crazy is that? Well, I'd have written about that if I'd have had that thought. Anyway, too late, already published. I'll be talking about it now. But it's really interesting, because over the years I've done lots of personality typology training, Myers-Briggs, just lots and lots and lots of different ones, and I love them. enjoyed them. I enjoyed learning about them. I enjoyed facilitating those conversations with groups and teams and leaders and individuals. But I'd always noticed how people could get very, well, that's not me. You know, they would kind of really push it away and say, you know, the questionnaire would give them a particular result and the person would go, no, that's not me. I'm this and this and this. And then other people would be like, oh, yeah, that's me. And that's why I can't do this, this, and this. And I started to notice, gosh, this can be quite limiting. This can be, and is it true? You know, so I started to delve a bit into the science of the kind of the science and the evidence behind personality and personality trait. And what's really interesting is that there is no evidence, there's nothing in the literature or in the science, in the research so far, and there's a lot out there that says that personality is fixed, that we have genetic predispositions, but that's all they are. They're predispositions, which comes back to the correlation versus causation thing. There's a lot of correlation, but there's no direct cause of, you know, no one's born a task-driven, amiable extrovert or whatever, you know, however you want to cluster these different personality things. No one's born that. We you know, it's imprinting, it's learning, it's modeling, and then it becomes habituated and conditioned, and so one of the myths is the myth of personality. And Benjamin Hardy wrote this great book about personality, and anyway, it's definitely, I would encourage you to read when you read the book, to take your time with that chapter, The Myth of Me, because I think it's very powerful to recognize that all the ideas we have about ourselves, none of them are fixed features. They're all emergent through consciousness, through thought, and habituated over time. And that's not to say that if there are things about yourself that you think of as being your personality, that you value and that you love and that you think make you who you are, great, that's lovely. But if you think that there is a facet of your personality that somehow is genetic and that's just how it is, it's brilliant to know that's not true. How bloody brilliant is that? It's so liberating. It's so liberating. And thank goodness me. I'm trying to think of this card once that someone bought me that said something like, you know, I'm glad this isn't my personality, because otherwise I'd be, and then it was a rude word, like I'd be screwed, you know. And I wrote this in the book, you know, thank goodness personality isn't fixed, because otherwise I'd be screwed, because you don't want to meet me some days. You want to meet the personality some days. It's not good. It's not great, you know. It's just, you know, you don't want to meet the neurotic bit of that personality, but it's personal, and therefore the personal bit, the personhood bit, is always up for grabs. So yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Yeah, we can keep recreating ourselves, and we do, and we create and recreate other people too. We create who they are for us. They're not fixed either, because of course this is universal, right? So this is not just like your personality is not fixed, but you know, that other guy that you don't like, yeah, his is fixed. No, it's the same for all of us. So again, seeing how we create these fixed identities in others is really powerful too. Well, he's just that kind of person. Maybe not. Yeah, there's lots of implications there in our relationships when we start to look at this. Like, oh, it's a very rich territory to explore, very rich.
I think it's amazing to sort of point out these distinctions and bring these myths to life, so we can question it and look at the premise underpinning that. So that's awesome. I would really encourage everyone here to get Bulletproof. You can see it next to Chantal. An excellent read. And Chantal, that's up, yeah. That's the one.
That's a plant. That's a
it.
book. That's a plant. That's a book. You can buy a plant, but I'd rather you get the book.
Definitely.
Sorry, I'm being naughty. I'm being naughty.
All good. Chantal, I want to take a moment to just thank you again for all the work you're doing and the impact you're having on all of us, and for taking the time to join us. I know it's early morning there, so much appreciated. And I'll be in touch, but go well. And thank you everyone else for joining and attending.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Really lovely to meet you all. And is everyone in Australia, just by the way?
New Zealand.
Yes.
New Zealand.
New
You're in
Zealand.
New
Oh, yeah.
Zealand. Jenny and Mia in New Zealand. I love that. At first it was a row of numbers. I'm like, why is she typing?
I was trying to move her away.
Code or code
she
for
wanted to
something?
walk across the whole thing.
It was brilliant. Like 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. Like, gosh, this is really cryptic. What's she trying to say? Then 0, 0, 0, 0. Oh, honestly, thank you. That just really made my day. It was absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Yeah. And so you're in New Zealand. Where are you, Brad?
Australia. Yeah, Tasmania.
So you're in
Tasmania.
Australia.
Yeah.
Oh, you're in Tasmania, Tassie.
Oh.
Oh, where else? Where is everyone else? I'm just curious.
Sydney.
Do we know?
I'm down in Manjimup,
Sydney.
West Australia.
Nice. Oh,
In
what's that
Melbourne.
called? Manjimup.
Manjimup.
What a great name. Wow. That is what a brilliant name. Who came up with that? That's amazing. I'd love to know the origins of that. And everyone else?
Perth.
You're in Perth. Oh, okay. All over. All over. Lovely. Oh, Rowan, thank you for all you're doing as well. And to all of you. I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. I guess it's getting later there now. But yeah, if you do read the book, please reach out to me and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear. I'd love to know. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me around. Always lovely to see you. Always lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Yeah.
night. See you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chantal.
Bye.
Take care.
Lots of love.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.